Hello, good evening. Good evening, good evening. I'm going to give it a good minute before I get started, just to make sure I give everybody time to jump on. Oh, there we go. And I am going to give it a few more seconds before I jump into this discussion for this evening. All right, all right. Let's go ahead and jump into this. I hope everybody has been having a fantastic week so far. A big win for me this week is y'all. So, for those of you who missed the announcement, I am in the process of writing my book, and my launch date is on my birthday. So, it's January 23rd of 2023. I am so excited, y'all. Y'all don't understand how excited I am about this book. I started the outline yesterday and went through writing. I got a lot of chapters knocked out just today, just taking some time to really just focus. And I got a lot done today. So that is a big win for me. And I want you to share your wins. What are some wins for you over this past week? I know a lot of us, it may have taken some adjustments, right? Because we are just getting back from eating all the turkey and ham and the dressing. And by the way, I had some seafood dressing. We were in Savannah, and my aunt, she is known best for her seafood dressing. And I ate so much of it that it was hard for me to recover when I got back. But, I'm here, and I started back, getting back into things probably on like Sunday evening. So it wasn't too bad. It was a much needed break, and I hope you all enjoyed your break as well. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our topic of discussion for today. So, today we are talking about knowing when to pivot, knowing when to pivot. And the reason why I felt that this was important to talk about is, and this is kind of me going to my own tracks, and I'm sharing some personal experiences. As you all know, anytime I'm sharing stories, I'm normally giving you my own personal experiences, and that's where I learn. That's how I've learned along the way, as well as being coach and just working with other people as well. And so one of the things that I know to be true is that as moms especially, we can tend to be so into the weeds and just kind of going through the motions, right, throughout the day, that we don't really take time to assess when there may be a need to make a pivot. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay. I'm going to talk about, because there are signs, there are indicators that are happening probably more often than what we think. And oftentimes, because we are so committed to just being and showing up as high performers, we are committed to being good wives, good moms, good friends, and just be everything to everybody. Sometimes we just tend to push through, although the signs may be right there. And so let's talk about that. So, what do I mean when I talk about making a pivot? It's basically taking a new course of action, or you are making changes, you are making adjustments to a situation. So pivots can come in a form, there can be major pivots, there can be minor pivots. What do I mean by that? Major pivots. Number one, because oftentimes when people hear, oh, you need to make a pivot, you need to make a shift, you need to make a change. Oftentimes for us, the first thing that comes to our mind is what? Is something that's going to be major, right? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. We don't always have to make a major adjustment or a major pivot in order to get exactly what we want. So, for example, from a personal experience, um, working in a job, right? So some of us, a major adjustment may be maybe you're going through a complete career change, right? Maybe for you it's just a complete career change. It's a change that's happening, a complete 180, right? Or maybe you want to decorate your entire home. You know, your entire home needs to be decorated. That's a major pivot, right? Versus a minor pivot being something where instead of decorating an entire home, maybe you're taking time to just say, hey, maybe we just need to rearrange. Maybe we need to rearrange this one room, right? This is the room where I can focus a little bit better in. So let me try to make adjustments here in this room. Or even career wise, sometimes a major, or I'm sorry, a minor shift can just be something as simple as just moving to a different position. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to leave your entire career, or from a business standpoint. We don't, from a major pivot, may be something as maybe you're doing a complete rebranding for your business, right? Or a minor pivot may be you're making small tweaks to a product or to a service that you're offering to your customers. So, again, I want you to put it in perspective because, again, when I talk about pivots, there can be major and there can be minor. Why is this important? Because in order to truly be fulfilled in what it is that we're doing, there's got to be alignment. There has got to be alignment in the things that we are doing. And when I say this, I mean things literally being in divine order. If they are not, and for whatever reason, something is off, and excuse me if you hear that, that's my daughter. She was, I guess, getting some ice. So if you hear that, that's what's going on. I promise nothing is tearing up in the house. But yeah, so I do believe that things need to be in alignment. There needs to be divine alignment in the things that we say that we want. And if it isn't, then ultimately what we feel is we feel this sense of uneasiness. We may feel a sense of dissatisfaction. We may not necessarily be happy. We may be left unfulfilled. And ultimately we feel stuck because we've made the decision not to make a pivot, not to make an adjustment to that situation. So a lot of us are stuck in situations. We feel stuck in situations. We feel stuck in that business that maybe we're not really happy about. We're stuck in that career because we have made a decision. And although we have not made a decision, remember, that's still a decision, right? Because we haven't made a decision, it leaves us stuck. It leaves us in that place of just not ultimately being satisfied because there's misalignment somewhere. Something is not lining up, and it is up to us to assess and to really pause. Really what this is all about is pausing to identify, what do I need to do differently? Do I need to change course? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to do something totally new, or do I need to stay where I am? Right? It's a matter of just assessing where you are and actually taking intentional time to assess that for yourself. Because, like I say, a lot of us as moms, as just bosses, right? Like we don't really take that time to really assess the situation and see if we need to pivot. So now let's talk about this. I want to talk about what are some signs that you may need to pivot. How to assess if a pivot is necessary. So the first thing I would say is paying attention to emotions, paying attention to your feelings. And I know, here's the thing, I will never advise, I will never coach any of my clients to make a decision solely off of emotions. That's number one. However, I do believe that your emotions are an indicator that, especially when it's a negative emotion, okay? Oftentimes what I found, and this is just kind of looking back on my career, looking in certain situations, oftentimes when you have that emotion, that's not an emotion of joy, it's not an emotion of excitement and fulfillment, and it's something that is draining you. You feel dissatisfied, you're unhappy, you're uneasy, you feel this tugging that you need to do something different. And a lot of times what I say, I feel that tugging in my spirit, like it's discomfort, I feel uncomfortable, and it's something pulling me and drawing me to do something, but there's a certain level of resistance that we have. Most of us, and I'm going to say if we're not careful about it, most of us probably have this level of resistance to that tug that we're feeling, right? And so, from an emotional standpoint, that is one aspect that I want you to consider. And what do I mean by that? I'm gonna break it down just a little bit more when I mean, when I mean, really paying attention from an emotional standpoint. Um, if any of you can recall, and I know I'm not the only one, but be in a relationship, especially in your younger years. Like I remember dating a guy. I could think specifically in college. If you can relate to this, you'll know exactly what I mean by this. But dating a guy, and you know that eventually you want to start a family. You probably want to get married. You probably want to have kids, right? And so, as especially as young girls, we have this image of in our mind about what we expect our significant other or our spouse, our husband or whatever, our significant other to look like, right? And so I just can think back to a time where I'm dating this guy, and even before we really started getting serious in a relationship, I can recall having that tugging, like, this is probably not right, right? Like, it was just this tugging that was just ongoing, and I knew it just didn't feel right to me, right? And I continued to move forward. And from an emotional standpoint, there were negative emotions. And I'm not going to say short term. I mean, when I say assessing those emotions, I mean looking at it from a long term standpoint. If you know that it's something that's been dragging you with certain people around you, certain relationships that you're in, and emotionally, it's just that disconnect. It's not giving you positive energy, positive vibes. It's something you need to stop and assess, right? And so I just remember being in that relationship, and I felt that tugging. I could not. The only thing I could think about, especially when we got later on in the relationship, and he started talking about like marriage, right? He started talking about these long term goals. In the back of my mind, I was like, I just don't see. I just know you're not gonna fit the bill. I'm sorry. I just knew he wasn't a good fit. How many of us have experienced that where there may have been a relationship, there may have been again a guy that maybe you were dating back in the day, and some people maybe now, right? No judgment, but um, you knew it was that tugging. You knew it was telling you that you needed to do something differently, and we resisted it. And I know for me personally, it was a lot of resistance in that process because it was fun dating somebody, right? Like it was fun having a boo having a boo with you, and somebody you could, go back to, and you didn't have to get all in the hustle and bustle of being out there in the streets with people, especially in college, right? Like it was a time a lot of people you were either on the end of where you were out dating, or you were on the other end where you were out dating everybody, and or maybe for some people they may have been by themselves. I'm not going to judge, but I'm just going to say for me that's what I can recall. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being in a relationship. I enjoyed having a boo, right? But at the end of the day, I knew he was not going to be husband material. I knew that. Like the song that comes to my head that I always think about is Keisha Cole, where she's talking about I should have let you go. Like that song, I always think about that because that's the song that I would play over and over in my head. And so that's kind of the tug that I'm referring to when I say it's an emotional standpoint. It's an emotional feeling that you may have that's giving you that urge and that tug to shift gears and to do something different. That's what I mean when I say that from a personal standpoint. And then even in my career, I can remember working in a job where it was not a good fit. The people weren't a good fit. And I'm saying for me, like I'm not gonna say they were just bad people. I'm just gonna say we just did not click the way I really wanted to. I didn't feel like I could really show up and be myself around this group of people and really be happy and fulfilled in what it was that I was doing. And so I knew for me, it was time for me to make that shift, to make that pivot, right? So that's the first thing I want you to consider is the emotional standpoint. But I don't want you to make that decision to make a pivot solely on emotion. The second reason, or the second factor that I would say in terms of what you need to assess, is your value system. What are the things that you truly value? What are those things that are important to you? Those things that are like, it's almost like you're not going to negotiate it, right? Like that time with your family. Maybe there's a certain income, there's a certain lifestyle that you have, right? And that's what you value. You value making a certain income, And because you know that it's going to be the income that you'll need to be able to provide for your family, to possibly fund your business, to be able to give to charities, to be able to give your family access to health, better health options, and all kind of things, right? Like, you have a certain value system that you expect, right? Even around the way you work. For some of us, in our hearts, we know that we want to, maybe work, you know, maybe 30 hours a week versus having to work 60 hours a week, right? I went through that experience, especially working in a particular job where, the expectation was, and here's the thing, the job that I was working at, I have to give this example because the job that I was working at, the most of the men on the leadership team, and you may have already heard me share the story, but most of the men on the leadership team, they were over the age of 50, white men, and I was the only black female leader on this leadership team. And I knew going into it that it probably was not the best fit, but I did it anyway because I was like, well, I'll clearly be making six figures, right? So I told myself, I can figure this out, I can work through it, right? Ultimately, it was something that I wasn't able to be in long because, again, there was a lot of it just didn't align. It didn't align to my value system. You have these white men over the age of 50 who have the expectation of me being in the office from, early in the morning till, night. And so it was oftentimes, because this expectation was set on me, a lot of times I wasn't able to be present in my home, and that ultimately affected me as a mother, as a woman. I wasn't able to really spend a lot of time with my spouse. Like, it was just a lot of dynamics with that, and I knew that it just did not align with what I truly valued, from being, again, first a woman, then being a wife and a mother. And so that's the second factor that I want you to pay attention to. So, number one, again, the emotional factor. And then number two, your values. What are those things that are non negotiable? Those things that you know that you need to have. And the reason why I say this is because oftentimes, especially us as moms, as women, sometimes we overlook, we try to force our way in places that really are not in alignment. You keep hearing me talk about the word alignment because, again, I truly believe that when you start getting that fulfillment and when you start thriving in any area of your life, there has to be alignment. And if it's not alignment, you got to really pay attention to the emotions, pay attention to the value system. And if it's something that's not matching up to what you value, it's probably a sign that you need to shift. You need to make a pivot in whatever area that is. So, what I would encourage you to do, and this is something that I've done, I would write it out in different categories. So I would outline, and this is something you can literally do. This is a journaling activity. Take 15, 20 minutes tonight or one day for the next week, and break it up in categories. So you can break it up in a category of your business, your career, your relationships, your finances, your health, and break it up in those categories, right? And what I want you to do is write out if you found that there is an emotion that's not alignment, because let's face it, on consistently, what we want are emotions that are going to create positive energy, right? They're going to be the emotions that are going to give us fulfillment, that are going to give us joy. That's ultimately what we're created. We're created to operate in that realm. Okay, we're not here. God did not put us on earth for us to be walking around here dissatisfied, unfulfilled, walking around here every single day for an extended period of time, right? And so the way I define being a boss mom is that type of woman who is going to take control of her life. And so rather than just sitting in it and staying stuck, because, again, like I said earlier, that is still a decision, right? Although we said we did not make a decision, it is still the decision to not make a decision, right? And so what I would say, if you find that there is some type of that pulling, that ongoing constant urge, that pulling to pull you in a different direction, I would say sit down, write out what are those emotions that you have behind that. Okay. And then whatever it is that you're doing, assess, does it align with what you value? Those things that you value. And if you have not clearly defined what your values are, take time to do that as well. Because I would say oftentimes we don't. A lot of us don't really take time to assess what we truly value. Write it down. Sometimes it just helps to see things, to write it down, to get it out your head. And I promise you, so much more clarity will come to you doing it that way. So, That's something that's worked for me. But I would say write it down, assess any areas in your life that may be creating just that negative, that urge for you to do something. Now I will say this, let me just add this caveat to it, because sometimes another way, another thing that may spark you to pivot, that may, tell, it may be a sign that maybe you need to pivot. Let's say on the opposite end of the spectrum, you may go to an event, you may go to a conference, right? And after you leave this conference, or after you leave this group of women, you may be inspired to do something. You may be encouraged to start something. Maybe some of you went to the maybe you went to the Wine and Mastermind Summit back in October, and maybe you were inspired to do something greater than where you currently are right now, right? But then there's a level of resistance behind you making that move. There's some kind of resistance behind it. Maybe you still, you just, for whatever reason, you have not made a decision to move in that direction. I want you to really sit down and think about that, and think about a way in which maybe you could pivot, and maybe even identifying if there's a need to pivot, because it's not always a need to pivot. Again, sometimes you may have a negative emotion towards a coworker. That may be a short-term thing, right? I'm not telling you to pivot just because you're mad with, a family member, right? I'm not telling you to leave your people just because you got mad with them over a piece of cake that maybe you wanted over the Thanksgiving holiday. Because if you're around my people, they get real serious about that cake. So I'm just throwing that out there. But again, that's a short term thing, right? I'm talking about that long term type of thing where it's just been constantly just nagging at you. It's eating at you, right? And you know that you need to do something different. I want you to really write that down and assess, is that current situation, does it align with the things that you really say that you want? When you're being really honest with yourself, what are the things that you really want? What are the things that you really need in order to feel that fulfillment, in order to feel like you have reached a certain level of success, right? What does success really look like for you? And if it's not in alignment, if it doesn't align, it may be a good sign, a good indicator for you to change directions. And again, it's up to you. That's really a judgment call on your end to decide whether or not it's going to be something that's going to be a major pivot, or if it's going to be a minor pivot. It's up to you. But I would encourage you to talk to a friend. You can talk to, if you have a coach, I would strongly encourage you to get a coach. I'm telling you, that is the best thing I could have done. Get a mentor, somebody that you can talk to, that number one, you can get some of this stuff out of your head, and they can give you insight. They can give you feedback around things that maybe you could do differently. They can give you different perspectives. So I strongly encourage you to do that. So take some time, think about that over the next week or so. I say give you, and I can check back in next week, but think about that over the next week. What are some things that maybe you feel led to pivot in? You feel led to make an adjustment, major or minor. I want to hear all about it. Okay. So I want you to put it in the Facebook group and share it with the other members in the Wine and Mastermind community. And I would love to hear whatever it is that, whatever pivot, whatever move that you're thinking about making, especially with the new year coming up. Okay. So we got the New Year's. I mean, I cannot believe it's December already. But yes, so we got the new year coming up, and this is going to be a perfect time for you to get clear about that. Getting clear about the areas in your life where maybe you need to make an adjustment, where you need to make a pivot, and write out, put a plan together, put a plan in place, partner with someone, get an accountability partner, mentor, coach, anybody to help you get to where you need to be. And don't just stay stuck, sis, because too many of us stay stuck. We stay stuck, and it keeps us from living out our fullest potential. So I want to encourage you to just take that one step. Take that one step within the next week, write those things out, and share it with the group. All right. And it is 8:25. And because I know that a lot of the members here are you're busy, high achieving women, right? Like we got a lot of things going on in our lives. And so I don't want to hold you here long, but just know that next week we are going to have another power talk. My goal is to continue this every Thursday. So if you miss it for whatever reason, as long as you're in the Wine and Mastermind community, you can always go back and catch the replay. But I want to hear about it. Let me know what you've gotten from this video. I hope this is something that's been helpful, that's been insightful, and I will check in with you ladies soon. Have a good night, ladies.